no escaping this one young lady," Stella said in her motherly tone again, which made my heart swell up. I walked over to one of the stools and the others smiled warmly at me. I smiled back and couldn't help but feel loved and happy. The atmosphere was so different here than it was back at my old pack. Over there, it was felt dark and cold and dreary. But here, in my new home, it felt warm and happy and bright. These people were nothing to be afraid of, I convinced myself. They look like nice people. I don't think they would ever hurt me. No, they wouldn't. They are good people, my wolf agreed. I smiled at my new family and sat on one of the stools by the island. Placed in front of me was a plate full of an egg, bacon, and a piece of toast. There was another plate filled with stacks of pancakes, then another full of chocolate-chipped muffins, and finally, a massive bowl full of fruits. I saw a spare plate of the side and grabbed the egg and one strip of bacon with one pancake and started munching on them. I noticed Grace coming to sit next to me, but this time I didn't flick, just stiffened slightly. "So, have you found your mate?" she asked. Anger coursed through my veins as she mentioned mate. He was probably playing with some girl right now. I felt immense pain in my arms. It felt like it was breaking. My body was burning. I felt as though I was literally on fire. Then it started on my legs. I screamed and tried to calm myself down. I took deep breaths in to calm myself down, but screamed at the top of my lungs again when I felt it on my other arm. "She's shifting," I heard someone said, even though I barely understood them at all. I only had vague memories after that. I felt being lifted up and being moved. Light sweat coated my forehead as my temperature increased. I continued screaming as the it got excruciatingly painful. I wanted to die that moment. "I don't know if she's going to make it," I heard someone say. The rest was a blur. My whole eyes were shut, so I couldn't see anyone. All I could hear were loud voices. They were hurting my head. It was too loud. Too noisy. The words were getting jumbled up in my head. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I just felt the pain taking over every bit of my body. It was too much. The pain. I couldn't handle it. I felt someone rubbing my forehead. It was warm. It made me want to lean into too, but I could still feel the pain. And it was worse than ever. I was too hot. Breathing in deeply, I tried to make the pain better, but it got worse as it had already spread through my body completely. I only opened my eyes slightly, but the image was blurry. All I could see were colors everywhere. The pain seemed to go on for what felt like hours before it finished, but not before my whole head cracked and formed into a new shape, with felt like the worst pain ever. Chapter 5. Pain. That's all I felt. I was engulfed in darkness. Yet I could hear people shuffling around and moving about. I tried to pry my eyes open, but they felt as though they were glued shut. I felt a warm hand take mine in, and I gripped it back in return. "Mum, she's awake, hurry Mum," I heard someone shout, which caused me to wince slightly as my head was pounding. I heard someone run in and listen to my heartbeat using a stethoscope. Caroline, can you hear me? If you can squeeze my hand again," I heard another voice say. Using the smallest amount of strength left I had in me, I squeezed their hand to indicate that I could hear them. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dried as though I hadn't drank anything for days. "She's awake. Caroline, I want you to open your eyes very, very carefully, okay?" That same deep voice asked again. Slowly, I tried to open my eyes, with as much effort as I could. As soon as my eyes opened, I was always blinded by the lights. Lifting my weak hand, I placed it on top of my eyes. "Hold on, let me turn the lights off," the man spoke again. Few seconds later, I felt them sit next to me again as the bed dipped. That voice seemed familiar. Their scent seemed familiar too. I removed my hands from my eyes and took him in. It was Alpha. He looked at me, worried but relieved when he saw me looking at him. I looked around and noticed an IV machine on my right and plenty of tubes sticking out from my arm. "Oh, thank God you're okay, Caro," he said. I tried to say something, but my voice was too dried. He must have noticed this because he put a glass of cool water and allowed me to sip it. After nearly finishing the whole glass of water, I nodded, telling him that it was enough. "What happened to me?" My voice sounded raspy, like I hadn't spoken at days. You shifted, but because you didn't have your mate, it was more painful, and because you are too weak, you fell in coma until you were healed enough to wake up, he explained. I tried to sit up but winced when I felt like one of my bones in my arm was on the verge of breaking off and laid back. Careful, you're still weak, he scolded. And I need to get my mum and Grace. She's waiting to meet you because she wanted to apologize. He blanked out for a minute and looked like he was mind-linking someone. Moments later, the door flung opened, and Grace walked in with sorrow and guilt clear on her face. She looked too pale and skinnier than last time, with red-rimmed, bloodshot eyes. I was confused. Why was she feeling guilty? She ran to my bed and kneeled down beside me and sobbed, "Caroline, I'm so sorry that I asked you about your mate. If I hadn't, then maybe you wouldn't have gone through such a painful shift." I was shocked. Why was she blaming herself? She really was a stupid girl sometimes. Even though my arms, or any part of my body, protested in pain, I lifted my arm and gently rubbed her arm. "Don't worry, Grace, it's not your fault. Don't ever blame yourself. I was bound to shift sooner or later. And it's not your fault my mate isn't here, so it was going to be painful anyways." I tried to comfort her. Her sobs softened down a little, but she still kneeled in front of me, with tears streaming down her face and looking at the floor like a 5-year-old child who was being punished, while hiccuping very loudly that it filled the entire room. "So you're not angry with me?" she whispered, scared of what I was going to say next. "No. What? Of course not," I exclaimed. She nodded and sighed in relief. She sat up on my bed and I took my hand back. Alpha wasn't here anymore, so he must have gone out during Grace's little outburst. "So, how long was I out for?" I asked. 2 weeks, and today would have been the 6th day, she replied. "Wow," I muttered, not knowing what to say. "The doctors thought you weren't going to make it because you were way too weak to shift, even with your mate next to you." She frowned. I teared up and flinched when she said mate. I knew my mate would never be next to me, but he would probably be marking someone like Eva. He would never love me, never be mine. I was too ugly, too weak, and too stupid for him. He deserved someone better. Someone who'd be the perfect Luna, someone like Eva. "Oh," I muttered, not knowing what to say once again. "The doctors say you need to put on more weight and then start exercising regularly," she explained. I nodded. I always knew I was underweight. Probably because I wasn't allowed to eat. Because my dear brother would say that I was too fat to eat, and that I should starve myself to lose some weight so that I could just be a tiny bit prettier. That alone was enough for me to stop eating properly. So he didn't even have to restrict the amount of food I ate, but he did anyways. "Yep, we need to get you to a normal weight then. We need to get to go shopping and have a makeover, because you obviously want to start your life from the beginning." She grinned, looking a child on Christmas Day. "Yep," I nodded, agreeing with her with a small smile on my face. I needed a new makeover, because I was going to turn a new leaf over and start my life fresh as a brand new person. "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. But you seriously have to get healthy super fast, okay? Promise me?" she asked, holding out her pinky finger. Rolling my eyes, I smiled and hooked my pinky finger with hers as well. "Yes, I promise for the 100th time." I huffed. She grinned, bouncing up and down, all signs of sorrow gone now. She started then telling me about her friends at school, and how kind they were, and how they'd love me. I was excited to go back to school, because now I'd actually have a friend who's not scared to stick up for who she cares for. She finished telling me about one of her friends, Chloe, who is apparently, and I quote, doesn't take shit from anyone kind of girls, when she got into a fight with one of the bitches and pulled out her extension, and when she did, half her hair was missing. I laughed at that, and I felt good laughing after crying for so long. I'd just finished laughing when a gentle knock came from the other side of the door. "Come in," I said loud enough for them to hear. A head peered in and looked around. Stella finally saw my face with a small smile on it and entered the room. She took a seat beside me when Grace excused herself, saying that she needed to go to meet someone. "So how are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Better," I smiled. "Good. As you already know, you need to eat, And once you get to a normal weight, you need to exercise and eat healthy, because right now, you're about as strong as a twig," she said in her motherly tone, which made me smile on the inside. My mum was never really at home, only about once or twice in 2 months, so I hardly ever got to see her, but every time I did, she looked worse. I remember those days when we used to have family time, before my life became a shithole. Flashback. Mama, Chris won't give me the ball, an 8-year-old Caroline cried. Her mum got down to her knees and pulled her in a hug, cradling her nose into the crook of her daughter's neck. "Oh, don't cry, baby. You know I get very upset when you cry," she murmured. It was true, she hated her daughter crying, and it broke her heart seeing her cry at all. She always knew her daughter was a fragile and sensitive little girl, and always needed to be protected. The thought of her fragile heart breaking nearly killed her. She loved her daughter, her son, and her husband more than anything in the world. They were her family. Caroline pulled away, and with her small hands, she cupped her mum's face. "Don't cry, Mama, I'm sorry." "It's fine, baby. But just remember, I love you lots, and I will always love you. No matter how old you get, or where you are, your Mama will always love you." She smiled. Caroline grinned and nodded. "I love you too, Mama." And with that, she ran away to her daddy for a lolly. End of flashback. I rolled my eyes but nodded anyways. I know. Grace gave me the same speech. Stella smiled and said, "That girl barely knows you, and she loves you already. She knows that you've got a beautiful heart." I could feel my eyes prickling. That was the best thing anyone had ever said to me. "And now, you're going to have to make sure you're extra healthy. After all, you need to look after he or she as well, you know," Stella continued. My face scrunched up in confusion. Who else was I meant to look after? Who was I supposed to look after? I asked. "You know, your baby," Stella said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "What baby?" I asked. "Come on, Caro, you know you're pregnant, right?" She smiled and glanced down at my tummy. Chapter 6. I was what? Excuse me. I coughed, looking at Stella with a confused face. I glanced down at my tummy. It was slightly bigger than normal. "You're pregnant," she repeated slowly, like I was a 5-year-old child. "Yes, you heard her, Caroline. We have a baby, our mate's baby." My wolf screamed at me like crazy. I froze. Shit. I was pregnant. I was pregnant. I was pregnant. I took in deep breaths so that I calmed down from my inner rant. And it was his baby. Howard's. I couldn't tell him no. He wouldn't want anything to do with the baby. He'd just leave the baby like he left me. I couldn't let my baby go through that pain that I went through. If he couldn't leave his lifestyle for me, his own mate, who loved him more than anything, what made me think he'd leave it for his child? Hell, I still love him, and I hate that I love him. But I know that in a few years' time, the bond would be broken if he marked and mate someone else, and if I got marked by someone else as well. Even though that thought did break my heart, I knew that there would never be a Howard and I, because he made that decision when he left me alone in there and started sucking off Eva's face. I had 3 options now, I thought with a cool mind. Abortion, adoption, or keep the child. I could never kill any child of mine. Never. It was an innocent being, and I wouldn't end his or her life for anything. And I knew that I would never forgive myself if my child ended up with a family who treated him or her like mine treated me. So, I had only one option left. Keep the child. Are you silent because you're thinking about abortion? Please don't. I know you're so young, but we'll help you, and especially Grace. She loves babies, she'll help you. Stella blurted with her eyes wide. I smiled at her, amused by her rant. "No, Stella, I'm not pregnant. I'm keeping my baby," I stated, rubbing my tummy softly. "Oh, thank God." She sighed in relief. "You know your baby was so weak, and he or she nearly died when you were shifting, but they managed to pull through. They are really strong, you know," she whispered, looking down at my tummy. "I know," I whispered and stroked my tummy. I knew I was scared shit out of my mind about being a mum. I didn't know the first thing about being one. But I also knew that I now had a family to help me, to care for me and my baby. "Good. Now you need to tell Grace and Henry about the baby," she told me. What? They don't know? I asked. Nope. No one knows apart from me and the doctor. I didn't tell them because I thought you weren't ready to tell them. That's why you didn't tell us. But that's obviously not the case, she said, standing up already. She walked to the door, but before she left she turned around and said, I think you need to tell Henry, I'll send him up. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about everything. My mate had sex with me and then ditched me. Then it turns out I got pregnant by him. I was barely 16, for goodness sake. How was I supposed to look after my child? What if I wasn't a good mum? No, I would be. I was determined to be a good mama to my baby and give them everything I never had. I would work my ass off if I had to make sure that my child got everything they wanted or needed. A light knock pulled me out of my reverie. Come in, I said loud enough for them to hear. The door opened and Alpha walked in with a tray of food. Mum said you wanted to talk to me, he said. I nodded as he took a seat on my right of the king-sized bed. Well, you see, I'm sort of pregnant. It sounded more like a question. Well, that's amazing. Congratulations. We have to have a part when you get better, oh my. There's so much to plan, he exclaimed. He truly looked like his mom right now. I was shocked and slightly amused at his reaction. He wasn't disappointed that I was pregnant, thinking that I was a whore. This was someone who I could trust. He stuck there with me when I went into coma or sleep or whatever. He looked after me. Even though I didn't know him that well, I knew I could trust him. Henry, I want to tell you about my past, but you can't tell anyone, because I'm not ready to share that part of my life yet, I said carefully, to see if he understood. He nodded and motioned for me to continue, so I told him. I told him about everything. My mum, my brother, school, Howard and Eva, and finally the janitor's closet. When I finished, he was shaking. His wolf had surfaced. He looked ready to murder. Calm down, Alpha, I said softly, placing my hand on his arm and rubbing up and down. How could they do that to you? He growled. One were to another, to their own people. How could they? How could your mate do that? Please, please calm down. For me, I whispered, blinking the tears away. Taking in deep breaths, he relaxed. I won't tell anything to anyone else until you're ready. You have my word, he vowed. Thank you for this. For everything, I said. I was truly grateful to him and the rest of the pack. You deserve this. You deserve so much better. Especially after what you've been through, he said honestly. I smiled and nodded. Well, you better have your food before it gets cold, he ordered. He helped me sit up with my back against the headboard, with me wincing once or twice when I hit a really sore spot. We sat quietly as he fed me my soup, which was so delicious I could literally gulp it down. And my garlic bread, followed by fruits and ice cream, and finally helped me with my orange juice. He had to force me to finish it when I said I couldn't eat anymore. But he said it was for the better of my child, and I had to, for my baby. You are going to be an amazing mum, he said, looking me in the eyes. I can see it already. I smiled and nodded, nervously playing with my fingers. Thank you. He nodded and left the room. After watching the TV for about an hour, tiredness washed over me and I closed my eyes and fell asleep. Chapter 7. It has been 1 whole month since I found out that I was pregnant. In that time, I wasn't allowed out of bed, not once, unless I had to wash myself or go to the toilet. I was eating and gaining weight, and finally I was the right weight for my height and age. The bump on my tummy was clearly visible, because even though I had only been pregnant for a month and a couple of weeks, werewolf pregnancy only lasts 5 months altogether. But Howard having Alpha's blood would mean that mine would last 4 months. After I'd told Grace, she didn't stop squealing and jumping up and down her bed for hours. To be honest, I wanted to do just that after the initial shock. My wolf was ecstatic that she was having a pup, and she wasn't howling for her mate anymore. After I'd received that pain for nearly every day, I finally told Alpha and Stella. They confirmed, after a lot of hesitation, because they knew that I would be heartbroken, that it was him mating with someone. As time went by, it became less painful, but I could still feel it. And it wasn't like it happened 1 a week kind of thing. It happened almost every single day. And this was the main reason why my wolf stopped howling and whining for her mate and instead became very quiet and only giving her suggestions and advice she needed, but she was super protective of her pup. I got to know the pack better in that time. I thought they would all think of me as sluts, but in fact, they were all overprotective of the baby and me, because they thought I couldn't handle defending myself being pregnant. They didn't judge me. Instead, they accepted me with open arms, without questions, and already I'd made a few friends. I was very close to Alison and Hayden, the beta. They were mates, and 2 years older than me. They loved each other more than anything, and honestly speaking, I wish that my relationship was like that with my ex-mate. Today I was going to the doctor's to get my pup checked to make sure he or she was healthy. Grace had already bought few things already, but she got unisex clothes because we weren't too sure of the gender. I was excited to have my pup. I just wanted it to come out already. I had a new reason to live. And although he or she wouldn't have his or her daddy with them, they would have all my attention and love, but right after birth, I had to get a job. I couldn't keep on sponging off on the pack's money. Not now, not ever. I was pulled out of my reverie when Stella shouted, "Hurry up, baby, you have an appointment." I sighed, then nodded and pushed the covers away. I took a quick shower and dressed in a white tank top to stretch over my stomach and a satin flower skirt. I looked like as pregnant as 5 months. I was bigger than what she-wolves would be, but I thought it was just because of the alpha blood. I brushed my hair and left it in a messy high bun before slipping on my bright blue Converses and staring at that girl in the mirror, who looked completely different to what she looked like months ago. She had bright blue greyish eyes that gleamed with happiness, unlike the dull blue they had been. Her hair was light brown, shining with volume, unlike what the ugly, thin, limp pink hair it used to be. Her skin was tanner, with her cheeks slightly pink, unlike the pale bluish colour it was before. And my dimples more visible more than ever. She was beautiful, and she was me. I ran my hand through my fringe and climbed down the stairs and outside, where Stella was patiently waiting with her arms crossed. "Bye, guys," I shouted before shutting the door. I heard a whole lot of good lucks and byes before I shut it fully. "There you are. Finally, Dan and Grace are in the car, and Dan is getting very frustrated," she said. "I know, I'm sorry. I was so nervous." I sighed. "Don't worry, you'll be the best mom in the world after me, of course. But now, let's get there and see your baby," she laughed. I chuckled and followed her to Alpha's BMW X5, which he hardly used, but he had to since there was quite 4 of us going. Everyone was so excited to finally have a pup in the house, because there wasn't one child in the whole pack. Most of them were teenagers, older than me and into their 20s. There were so older people, but not that many, and a few parents here and there. This was because, years ago, they had a massive war with the rogues, where most were killed, including Stella's mate and Alpha's father. The title of the Alpha went to the old beta until Alpha was old enough to handle the pack. When the war ended, there were only about 20 people left in the pack, and they were extremely vulnerable. The old beta, Hayden's dad, helped rebuild the pack and taught them how to fight, as he was an ex-fighter of another pack before he moved here. Most of the current pack members were rogues, who either have ran away or didn't have anywhere to go, and this pack took them in. They helped them get on their own 2 feet, and now they were a strong pack with all the members, because they all knew how to fight and kill ruthlessly. I got into the car and buckled my seatbelt. Throughout the whole journey, Grace was squealing about how excited she was to be an auntie, and Alpha continued sighing and rolling his eyes at her, while I just laughed and shrugged. When my baby was born, I wanted them to have my surname, never Howard's surname, Taylor. They were going to be a proud Forrest. Finally, after the car stopped outside the hospital, it was a werewolf. One, since most all the people living in this town were werewolf apart from 1 or 2, because they were the mates of a werewolf and knew about us. I started growing very anxious, and Grace must have noticed this because she took my hand in hers and squeezed it. Although it was a very small gesture, I made better and more confident. I was ready for this, I chanted in my head. Even though my baby was unexpected, I was never going to stop loving it or caring for it, because I knew how it felt. And I wasn't prepared to let my baby go through what I went through. We walked up the steps and went to the maternity section, where we had already booked an appointment. We all took a seat in the waiting room, where I saw a very pregnant woman with her mate on the side, holding her hand with one and rubbing her stomach with the other. I wish my life was like that. It would have been so much easier if it was. Because, right now, I was a 16-year-old single mum without a job or her own home. Finally, my name was called out and we walked straight to the doctor's room, without everyone around bowing at Alpha while he kindly smiled at them. We took a seat, myself and Stella, while Alpha and Grace stayed standing up. My new doctor, Dr. Goodwin, was only about 24 years old and beautiful, with brownish, reddish hair and blue eyes with a lightly tanned skin toned. She had a perfect hourglass-shaped body and was quite tall. I aspired to be like her. After asking me plenty of questions, which I obviously answered, she led me along with Stella, Alpha and Grace into another room painted in a light cream color, with photos of babies developing as they grew, decorating the walls. There was a bed in the middle of the average-sized room, with an ultrasound machine on the right of it. I laid down and lifted my top just under my bra. She touched my stomach in different places and asked me some more questions. I started growing a little irritated and impatient because I wanted to see my baby's first ultrasound scan already. I think your stomach is too big for someone who's only been pregnant for 6 weeks, even with the alpha blood, she said, looking down at my stomach with confusion. My heart stopped for a second. There's nothing with my baby, is there? I asked quietly. I'm not sure, she gave a sympathetic glance, but we'll see after the scan. She got out some of her things and turned to me to say, it's going to be a little cold. I nodded, and she squeezed some blue gel onto my stomach, which made me flinch because of how cold it was. Using the transducer, she applied the gel onto my belly. I looked up at the screen hoping to see my baby, but I was met with a black, fuzzy screen. I was growing worried with each second. Grace and Stella both grabbed one of my hand, and Alpha stayed back, looking at the screen as well. Dr. Goodwin moved the transducer around, and finally, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a head. Ah, there it is. They're quite naughty, hiding like that. She laughed. I chuckled a bit, but kept my eyes on the screen. She continued gliding it on my stomach before she stopped. I looked at her as she stared at the screen, with wide eyes. What's wrong, Doc? I asked. She turned to me with a bright smile before practically screaming, You're having twins. Chapter 8. I stared at her with disbelief as she grinned at me. Grace and Stella both started squealing and bouncing up and down like the little kids they are. Suddenly, worry washed over me. What if I wasn't able to provide for both my babies? What if I wasn't a good mum for both? It was a lot different now that I was going to have 2 babies, and not one like I originally thought. But that didn't mean that I was going to abandon them. I was going to love both of them equally. Caro, what's wrong on? Say something, Stella pleaded. I shook my head and answered, Nothing's wrong. I'm just shocked. I'm going to have 2 babies. Here. I know. I'm so excited. Grace screeched. Geez, tone down a little, will ya? Alpha glared at Grace playfully, to which she responded by sticking out her tongue at him. He just chuckled and walked to me and embraced me into a warm hug. Congratulations, Kero, he muttered in my hair. I nodded and smiled at him once he pulled away. All right, you want to find out what gender your babies are? Dr. Goodwin asked. I nodded enthusiastically while she glided the transducer across my stomach. Right, here's your first baby. It's a little girl. Here you can see her tiny little hands, she said, pointing at the screen. I watched in awe as the little hands moved slowly. I glanced at Alpha, Stella and Grace and watched their mouths form into an O shape. They were fascinated too by my little girl. And here's your second baby. She pointed at my other baby. Here you can see its feet. It's a boy. Wow, we have plenty of shopping to do. I hope you're ready, Hui said. I groaned and rolled my eyes at her. Well, so far, everything seems well. They both look very healthy considering your past medical record. Just eat healthy and I'll give you a package with everything you need to know, she said in her doctor voice again. Using a blue paper towel, she wiped off the gel and helped me off the bed. I gratefully took her hand and followed her into her room, with Grace, Stella and Alpha in tow. When we got there, she scheduled another appointment in a couple of weeks' time and handed me a thick bundle of paper full of information I needed to know for the babies. We thanked her and went to the car, where Henry drove and Grace and Stella sat on either side of me. Once we reached home, I followed Stella and Alpha with Grace beside me, still slight giddy. That girl is always in a happy mood. What does she take? I didn't even make it through the door when Allison tackled me into a bone-crushing hug. C can't be. Breathe, I pretended to choke. She pulled away almost immediately with her face filled with worry and guilt. Shit. I'm so sorry, Caro, she said in panic. I'm fine, and enough with the swearing. When my babies grow up, I don't want their first word to be a cuss word, I said. You know that's going to take a little time. Wait. Her eyes wide with confusion, she asked, What do you mean, babies? I'm having twins. I screeched in excitement. We both bounced up and down, holding hands until Grace joined with a big grin. All three of us bounced up and down with the biggest smiles on our faces. Gee, what is with all the noises here? Hayden, who is also Grace's brother, walked with an annoyed expression on his face, but I could see right through it. He loved it when his mate was happy. Hayden was a very good-looking guy with brown eyes and brown hair that was slightly messy and tousled. He was quite tall, about 6'1", and had a lean but muscular build. He looked the complete opposite to Allison, who had beach blonde hair. It was her natural hair color, and light blue eyes with sun-kissed skin. She was beautiful, with her bright smile that hardly ever left her face. She had petite figure, to which Hayden looked like a giant next to. OMG, Con. Can you believe it? Caroline is having twins. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Wow, that's great. Congrats, Caro, he said before pulling me into a hug. Thank you, I grinned at him. Right, we should have a party, Alpha said. Hell yeah. Grace, Stella, and Allison screamed. Right, we're having a BBQ this Sunday evening. I'll inform the rest of the pack, he informed us before heading to his office. All right, Caro, we need to go shopping. You're nearly as big as a whale. I doubt you're going to fit in all your clothes, teased Allison playfully. I playfully glared at her and crossed my arms. I'm not that fat. Am I? Tears began to well up in my eyes. I was fat. Stella must have noticed, because she wrapped her arms around me. You're not fat, honey. You're beautiful, she whispered before kissing me lightly on my forehead. I'm so sorry, Caro. I didn't mean to make you upset, Allison said frantically. It's fine. I just hate these damn hormones so frigging much. They control all my emotions. I said with frustration. Oh, but it's worth it. Imagine you're two beautiful angels by the end of it, she said. Yeah, you're right. Anyways, I'm going to go to bed for a small nap. Wake me before dinner, okay? I asked no one in particular. They all nodded before I climbed up the never-ending stairs to my room. Once I was there, I changed into a pair of cotton shorts and a large top. I sat on my bed with my back against the headboard. I looked around at my walls, which were covered with random photographs of me and Grace, Stella, Alpha, Allison, or Hayden. Each of the photos showed as my stomach got bigger each time. I rested my head back into a pillows and closed my eyes. I hadn't played my guitar for as long as I could remember, so without second thought, I sprung off my bed and into my walk-in closet right at the back. I finally found my guitar case, which I didn't spend long at all before opening and taking out my guitar. I picked it up and ran my hand over the smooth surface of it. I carried it into my bedroom before taking a seat on the edge of the bed. I plucked the first string, which brought back the same excitement I got every time I played the guitar. Before I knew it, I was playing Love Stories by Taylor Swift and singing to it as well. I didn't know how I sang, but it seemed as if the words flew out of my mouth so naturally. Once I finished, I sighed and laid back on the bed with my guitar laying back on my right hand. I was on the brink of falling asleep when the most cruel pain hit me in the lower abdomen. I knew it was Howard, but normally when he was with someone, it wasn't as normally bad as this now that I had learned to deal with it better. I arched my back and screamed, with tears spilling out my eyes. Seconds later, someone rushed in and sat beside me, wiping away the sweat on my forehead. I struggled for air and wrapped my arms protectively around my stomach. My wolf was howling in pain as well, which was how I knew for definite that it was something to do with Howard. With my eyes tight shut, I continued, screamed in pain and moving about. Someone offered me a hand with my clung onto. I knew there was someone shouting orders around. I was hurting too much to be able to concentrate on hearing it. I tried pressing the spot where the